The former leader of the Conservative Party, Lord Hague, has said that drug use should be decriminalised and treated as a health problem because of years of failed approaches to tackle the issue.
Yes, the former Foreign Secretary has said that the UK should look to countries such as Portugal, which has seen the use of drugs fall after it cut criminal sanctions and ploughed money into healthcare instead. Well, to discuss this, we're joined by David Badcock, the CEO of Drug Science, as well as the journalist and author Peter Hitchens. Thank you, both of us, for joining us this morning. How this works, you'll have 60 seconds each to state your case. So, David, let's start to you. Do you think Lord Hague is right? Should we decriminalise drugs?
Well, yes, I certainly do think he's right. And I'm very glad that he has come out and said this. It's a shame that he didn't say this when he was a government minister, but nonetheless, I think he's absolutely right. I think decriminalisation is the right way for the UK to go in terms of drug policy. What we know about decriminalisation is it will have a decrease in drug-related harm. It will decrease drug-related deaths, and it will reduce the huge amount of money we spend in the criminal justice system, essentially criminalising people who come into contact with drugs. We've had 50 years of a drug policy in the UK which has failed. The 1971 Misuse of Drugs Act has a prohibitionist approach which has failed us. It hasn't had an impact on drug-related harm. It hasn't achieved its primary objective of reducing drug consumption. What it has done is it's increased harm. It's damaged public health. It's exacerbated the social inequalities.
That's your 60 seconds, I'm afraid. That's your 60 seconds. I'm going to flick over now to Peter Hitchens, of course. He's a writer, a thinker, and certainly a controversialist as well at certain periods in time as well. Peter, look, take it away. Your 60 seconds starts now. Should we decriminalise drugs?
No, we shouldn't. The whole idea is tripe marinated in bilge. I've written a book called The War We Never Fought, which describes the nonsensical claim constantly made by drug legalisers that we've been fighting a war against drugs for the past 50 years, or that the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971 was designed to do any such thing. It began half a century of stealth decriminalisation, which is the cause of almost all the problems we face. People who claim that there's anything else going on simply haven't been properly briefed, which is the case with Lord Hague. This is the second time Lord Hague has made one of these outbursts, and I don't quite know what he's attempting to do by drawing publicity to himself on this matter, but there you are. The truth is that almost all the major drugs in this country can be consumed without any great legal danger to the consumers, because the police and the courts have abandoned the laws against possession. These laws are successfully prosecuted in civilized, free countries, particularly Japan and South Korea, and in those countries the use of drugs is considerably lower. Where drugs have been decriminalised, legalised, it hasn't worked.
Hit your limit, Peter. You've hit your limit, I'm afraid. Can I just stick with you, Peter, and just say, look, OK, fine, I understand your points there, but aren't we just putting money and indeed weapons and indeed death tolls now in the hands of drug gangs?
Well, it's not true. In Canada and Colorado and many other jurisdictions where legalisation or decriminalisation has taken place, the gangs continue to flourish, because the first thing that happens with legalisation is taxation. And, of course, people want to avoid that. And any feeble attempt at regulating the quality or strength of the drugs can also be circumvented by people going out and buying from the illegal market, which continues to exist. This claim has been made for decades by the drug legalisers. As soon as it was actually put into practice, it turned out to be completely false. Yet they carry on, as they always do, lying about this issue, because they will not tell the truth. What they fundamentally want is a society in which these things are on sale and advertised on television, and people can make billions out of them.
David, what do you say to that? You just want drugs decriminalised, you want them everywhere on our streets, you want our kids taking them, you want big corporations making billions out of them. No,
absolutely not. I mean, that's not the point of decriminalisation. It's not about just legalising drugs and allowing everybody to have access to them freely and widely. What we are talking about is not criminalising people who come into contact with drugs, and often the reasons they come into contact with drugs, it's not their fault. There are the health inequalities that exist, all the inequalities that and the life chances that people have, and why they come into contact with drugs, rather than treating them as criminals, which then just leads to essentially more harm for that individual. It should be treated as a health issue, and people should be offered treatment rather than being criminalised for using drugs. So I think that's what it's about. What we're looking for is a state-regulated model which regulates very carefully how people would use drugs, but doesn't just simply have a blanket ban that just pushes it into the criminal underworld.
Have you got any proof, though, that the policy that you want won't lead to more people taking drugs?
Well, there's great examples in other parts of the world where they have pursued this approach, and exactly as Lord Haig talked about in his article, they've done this in Portugal. In 2000, Portugal had one of the worst drug problems in the world, and they decided to decriminalise drugs and follow this policy. And as a result, there has been a huge reduction in drug-related harm, in drug-related deaths. The cost to society has reduced. The spread of things like blood-borne viruses have reduced. It's been a huge success in Portugal, and I think that's what we should do here in the UK.
And Peter, do you accept that point? Has, in your eyes, the Portugal case been a huge success?
No, I don't know why he can bring himself to admit this twaddle. What Portugal did was simply to formalise what was already the case. They hadn't been enforcing their drug laws, as we do not, and they then announced formally they wouldn't enforce their drug laws. Nothing fundamentally changed. The problems Portugal had with drugs before they stopped formally enforcing them continued afterwards. Lifetime use of several drugs has increased. The whole myth of the Portuguese drug paradise is exposed in a long blog posting anybody can read, which I've written, and in numbers of more impartial studies of the matter. A couple of years ago, the mayor of Porto, Portugal's second city, wanted to have some of these reforms reversed because they simply do not work. So much of what the drug legalisers say is complete piffle. They don't listen to anything that their opponents say. They constantly claim, for instance, this stuff about criminalising drug users. For goodness sake, it's almost impossible to get arrested or prosecuted for drug possession.
Peter, what would you say to people? What would you say to people who might be looking at this now and going, "Hang on a minute, this Peter Hitchens guy, maybe he's a bit of a hypocrite. You're banging in favour of civil liberties, but you don't want people to choose what they can put in their own bodies."
Well, civil liberties are about thought, speech, and assembly, the great classical freedoms. They're not about the freedom to stupefy yourself so that you're unable to protest against.
Some of the best music
hang on a minute. I'm answering
under the influence.
I'm answering your
the best
question.
artwork.
I haven't finished. Do you think the drug legalizer gets about a 300-mile run? As soon as I say anything, in you come. Look, the point about the freedom to stupefy yourself is the freedom to make yourself a passive, compliant subject, non-citizen. Why would that be a freedom comparable with the freedoms of thought, speech, and assembly? Any tyrant would love to have a stupefied population, and indeed tyrants do love to have stupefied populations. It simply doesn't work as an argument.
OK, well, just come back to that then.
I'm sorry?
Just come back to that then, please, David.
I'm not really sure what I can say to that.
No, you can't say much, can you? Because you don't really have much in the way of facts or arguments to back up, which is basically a crude case, morally equivalent to that of big tobacco, which spent years and years and years claiming that its products were not harmful when they were, and making billions out of them. It's the most disgraceful activity in which you participate. You should frankly go home and stop.
Well, David, then, is there any truth to the notion that potentially it would suit governments to legalise all drugs? The population's essentially a bunch of, stoned idiotic layabouts, and therefore they're easy to control.
No, I don't think that's the case. I mean, all we're looking at here is the fact that the harm caused by drugs has increased over the last 50 years in the UK and in many other parts of the world. We have the highest level of drug-related deaths in the last 20 years. Now we have more drug-related harm. We're spending more money in the criminal justice system on drug-related offences. And it's simply not working. And
I really struggle to believe that if you decriminalise drugs, people won't take drugs because there's a reason, well, there's many reasons I wouldn't take drugs, but some certain softer drugs, I don't do them because they're illegal. I might be more inclined to do them if they weren't, because I don't want to break the law and I don't want to end up in jail. And a lot of people might think, oh, I might try that recreationally now and again, but do you know what? It's illegal and I don't want to do it. And you're trying to tell me that those people would carry on not taking those or being tempted to take those if they were decriminalised.
Well, that is indeed a crucial point. One of the main reasons why people, particularly young people, take drugs is the very heavy peer pressure on them to do so. Drugs are readily available in our schools, as everybody who understands what's going on here knows, and part of that pressure is as I say, very strong pressure to conform with what other people are doing. If there was a genuine reason to believe that if you took and possessed drugs, you were in danger of arrest and prosecution, of losing your freedom also to travel to countries such as the United States, people wouldn't do it. But everybody knows now that the police do nothing about it because of the policies which this gentleman here comes to advocate and support, which we've pursued for the past 50 years, of not bothering to deter people from taking drugs. These policies have had exactly the effects he claims to dislike, yet he wants more of them.
You have the last word then, go on.
Well, can I just ask, sorry, just on that, David, for the last word, do you do drugs?
Sorry, are you asking me? I couldn't hear you. You asking me that?
Sorry, do you do drugs then?
It's not. I don't really want to discuss my own.
Well, no, but I think it's relevant. If you're okay for them to be decriminalised, then maybe have you got any personal experience? Do you know what you're talking about?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Do you know what you're talking about in that regard? If you've never ever done drugs or you don't do drugs, do you know what it is that you're trying to decriminalise?
Yeah, of course I do. We've produced a huge amount of evidence to show that drug policy isn't working, that the classification system of drugs isn't related to the evidence that we know. Drug-related harm is caused by the misinformation there is, by driving it into the criminal underworld, and people not being able to make an informed choice about what they do.
So the mental illness, which is correlated strongly with marijuana use and grows all the time, and also the violent crime, which is correlated strongly with marijuana use, and have grown as a result of the policies which you advocate of decriminalisation of drugs, which we've been pursuing informally, as I say, for 50 years, a case you cannot argue against.
Well, no,
it's true.
I can argue against.
How bothered are you? I mean, how bothered are you as a legaliser or decriminaliser by the growing correlation between severe lifelong mental illness and the use of marijuana, a drug whose legalisation you appear to favour? Do you think that's a good thing, that more people will become mentally ill?
Well, I don't believe that having a decriminalisation policy would lead to people experiencing worse mental health.
Why not? Do you not? Surely, if a drug is decriminalised, more people will take it. Well, no, I'm sorry. I've listened to you a lot, and I've listened. You people always get the first go and the last go on these programmes. Do you really seriously think that if drugs are decriminalised, fewer people will use them? Do you honestly, seriously want to maintain that if drugs are decriminalised, fewer people will use them? Seriously.
I think people would use them far more safely in an informed way, and they will be regulated, which will take them out of the criminal.
How do you use heroin and crack cocaine safely, then, David?
Sorry, it's difficult to hear.
Sorry, how do you use heroin and crack cocaine safely, was Mercy's question.
So obviously there are more harmful drugs than others, and I'm not advocating for legalising drugs like heroin and crack cocaine. Of course, what I'm saying is people who do use those drugs should be offered treatment and support rather than simply being put into the criminal justice system, which generally doesn't help the situation. And we've proven that over the last 50 years or so.
But this already happens.
All right, guys, I'm sorry. I could do this all day. I could do it all day, and I'm very sorry, but we've got to go. Look, both of you, that was fantastic. This is exactly what this feature is designed to do. Robust debate, head-to-head. It did what it said on the tin. The one, the only Peter Hitchens there, and David Badcock as well, CEO at Drug Science. Thank you so much for joining us on that big debate, which was whether or not, actually, drugs should be decriminalised.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.